Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Victory Never Sleeps, featuring Adulting with Alan. Um, that guy over there is Alan. We are also joined by a special co-host. This is Ditto. I did not name him, but recently my wife and I adopted a elderly dog. His owner passed away, and he's 13, and I think that's about their life expectancy, but he's a pretty cool guy and wanted to have him spend the rest of his time with people and not in animal control. So see how long we got with him. He's pretty cool. He's a good dog so far, and he is like attached to me, so he's probably going to be a fixture. Stuff since last time. Top of the show things. Be aware if you can. This weekend is Midsummer at Odenshoff in Brownsville, California. I will be headed up tomorrow afternoon myself. We got people flying in from across the country to be there. This one's going to be a big one. We're celebrating 30 years of the Asatru Folk Assembly. It's going to be a fantastic weekend, and we would love to share it with you guys. So if you're able to get yourself to Brownsville, California this weekend, we would love to celebrate Midsummer with you. Coming up just 1 month later, we have Sigerblood at Sigerheim. That's in Jackson County, Tennessee. It's coming up on July the 25th through the 27th. Hopefully, Alan, you going to be there for that one? I don't think Alan is. I will be there. Nick will be there. Okay, Alan is.
He'll be there. I don't know why my mic's muted. Hold on a second.
Okay.
I don't know why my mic's not acting up. God dang it.
Probably Nick. Casting evil on you. So are you going to be there, Lawspeaker? Excellent. Then we look forward to seeing Lawspeaker Allen Turnage. I will be there. Our producer, Nick, will be there. Ditto will not be there. And we would love to see the rest of you guys there if you can make it. It's in Jackson County, Tennessee. We would love to share a beautiful and amazing piece of property that will be the home of Tiershoff as well as the AFA Capitol in the coming years. It's a very special place. It's also where we have the magnificent statues of our founder, Stephen McNallen, and his lovely wife, Githia Sheila McNallen. So yeah, come by, check it out, celebrate victory with us. Other stuff, 1 month following that, in the month of August, we have Freyfaxi at Baldershoff. So if you can make it to that one, that is in Murdoch, Minnesota. We'd love to see you guys there. It's August 22nd through the 24th. Any or all of these, you can get in touch with any of our folk builders. They will get you squared away. I would love to see you at any or all of these events. And I'll say this. Every few years it goes by, every time we get a new Hoff, we get a little bit closer to every one of you guys. But for those of you that this is a bit of a drive or a bit of a travel to get to, I can attest that it is worth it. I don't hear people lament their great distance they've gone to go to an AFA event. I very often hear that it's life-changing, that it's amazing, that it's, something that they really needed in their life. And that certainly was the case with me. If I had not gone to Midsummer at that time, Alta, California in 2010, I would very likely not be here today. It really was life-changing, and these truly can be, and I would like everyone out there to get a chance to experience that. So if you can, come on out. Other stuff, top of the show. GW Farnsworth, as always, starts us off with the spirit of generosity, donating $30 to VNS and $20 towards the Baldershoff steeple. Thank you, as always. We appreciate you very, very much. And another amazing donor, Matthew Bean, decided to donate $50 to VNS. He says, "Hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and see y'all at Midsummer." Looking forward to seeing you there in just a couple of days. So that's what we have off the top, but I'd also like to update you on something else. So you guys have helped out on my steady push for fundraising to get Njordsoft paid off. Thank you all so much for that. That has been paid off. And as promised, we hit the ground running on trying to figure out Phrasehoff. I spoke with the Ericksons today. Whitten Erickson and his wife, Githia Katie Erickson. They are, the point people for that project. It is going to be very close to them, and they will be officiating that Hoff. Again, we're trying to get it in either Western Pennsylvania or Eastern Ohio. The search is on. We have done walkthroughs on 2 different properties so far. There's another walkthrough planned shortly. We are eagerly working on that, and we have started to raise money for the down payment. That's the next order of business on this, finding that piece of property and then having a down payment and getting in contract on that. So we're working hard on it. We need to raise some money for that. We're currently sitting at $1,801 right now. Anybody who can help us with that, we would appreciate it. It will help us get there quicker. You guys are amazing. Generosity has enabled us to do some truly amazing things. So thank you guys. And if you're interested, runestone.org, you can donate towards the war chest we are building to get that Hoff going. And with that, our Lawspeaker has a very important, very in-your-face these days topic to talk about that I'm eager to have a discussion about this evening. So, Alan, take it away.
I guess I should do the mic check. Am I working? Am I live now?
You are.
Okay. In that case, the panic subsides a little bit. Because I'm trying out a new camera. So I was worried that the new camera was not functioning correctly with the other techno mumbo jumbo that is always slightly out of my ken. So again, I appreciate you having me on. I always like to introduce the topics of adulting with a couple of disclaimers and explanations. First, like Alzheri said, I appreciate y'all's attention and questions and discussion. I will tell those of you who have not emailed me after an episode like this, I have gotten lots and lots of emails from people asking me more specific questions, and I'm always glad. That's what my position here with the folk, and I am proud to serve. If you have more specific questions, I'm happy to give you a little bit more detail in private, both as counselor and as advisor, legal stuff, personal stuff. I've seen more stuff than farmers insurance, so I know a few things. And then the disclaimer: tonight's episode is not designed to treat anything specific. If you feel like you have true mental health issues that are beyond simple fixes, which is sort of the limit of my ability, please seek medical advice. Now, that, with my personal disclaimer, is I think most psychiatrists are off their own personal rockers, so I don't know how much I would take from them. Of course, I don't believe in a lot of medicinal care either. I think most drugs are super bad. They're worse than Mr. Mackey thinks. So, sorry for that wandering disclaimer. So, to start in with the topic, what we really think about when in the Western model of medical care is typically illness treatment. We don't think of even though it's called the healthcare system, even mental health, most of what American Western medicine does is treat sicknesses. You don't go to the doctor until you're sick, and he gives you a pill. And then that pill has some other bad side effects. And so he gives you a different pill to counteract those side effects. And now, that being said, if I had a broken bone or, x-rays are marvelous things, and modern technology is great for the things that it works well on, but it is not good at wellness treatment. And that is where I think all of us, myself included for a while, have lost a lot of focus. I think that the better plan is wellness. And that's why one of the first topics that we did here was talking about diet. And we've talked about exercise and fitness, because all of those things fit together, both in the mental health model and in the personal health model. Wholeness, holiness, all have the same root word. And so it's, if you can integrate your personality into a way that is where your outlook on life is positive, and where your interactions with people are positive, you will be, I almost used the wrong word there, because in studying up on this, and actually for several years, we talk too much about happiness. And happiness is a good thing within its limitations, but and some of it is certainly the definition. I think the ideal place for mental health, where you're most healthy mentally, the Greeks, our Southern Aryan folks, had a term called, it's on my notes, it's called eudaimonia. And there's several videos out there on YouTube about discussing what the meaning of eudaimonia, and even pronouncing it in several different ways. Eudaimonia. I'm not Greek. I apologize for butchering their pronunciation, but the shorthand version that I heard several years ago but could not find repeated in any of those videos is that eudaimonia, which means accord with the soul, wellness of the soul. Eudaimonia is proper action in accord with virtue. And so we tend to think of happiness in really what more, in a narrower definition, should be called joy or elation. Those sorts of terms are more fitting for what we tend to categorize in the word happiness. It's not just Big Brother who has done such a great job of dumbing down the language. We don't parse out these terms like we should. We think of all of those things, all those terms that I've been talking about, fall under that general word of happiness, plus good happiness. And but they're not all the same thing. And so when we are modeling good mental health, we should be thinking of aligning our activities and our mental activities with what is good for us, what we know to be good for ourselves and for our people. Sometimes that means that we have to work a little more than we would really want to. It means that we have to sacrifice some things so that we can have nice house. We have to give up money or give up time so that we can go and visit and be with folk, because we need their company. When I go to the Hoff here at Njordshof, sometimes I have to drag myself down there, but I'm always happy to see all those beautiful people with whom I share so much, not only in personal belief in the gods, but just in the worldview that we share. And even on those days that I feel like I don't want to go because I don't need them, but they need me, and that's a good thing, that we need each other. Certainly one of the things that is wrong, one of the evidences of the soul sickness that permeates Western civilization is that we've been separated into a very atomized way of living. We used to live what we now think in fairly crowded conditions, but in a way that that was comfortable for people because we knew everybody. I mean, it's one thing to live in an apartment building with 100 people you don't know. It's quite different in the, not that long ago when we lived close by hundreds of people that we knew intimately. And those kind of intimate relations are healthy for us. They're healthy for all the people around us the more people that you know well, although there is a limit, according to some of the sociological studies that have been done, there are limits to how many people you can know at that level. But those few hundred people, if you know them well and integrate well with them, that again forms that whole person. You can become parts of a whole by integrating into a society like that. And that's sort of been the good and bad of the internet, because the internet has exacerbated most of the things that are wrong with civilization. You can sit in your house and play games and order food and watch videos and never leave the house and have all of your basic needs met, all except for the most important need, which is the need for human interaction. On the other hand, the internet brings us this show. So I recognize the irony or paradox, I get those confused, um, about knocking the internet on the internet. I can't remember the first name, but from the movie years and years ago, Dr. Oblivion, who would only appear on TV. Videodrome, that's that reference, that old James Woods movie. Very prophetic. So, but again, what we want to try to strive for is health, mental health, and some of those things that again sort of all fit together with these things is actual engagement in your life and in all aspects of your life. Mindfulness is the general overarching term for that. I think living a mindful life is when your brain is turned on and integrating into the world in the greatest possible way, to the greatest possible extent, makes for a healthier lifestyle. Zoning out while you're driving or waiting for stuff, and there's learning to live in a place where your mind is on autopilot too much of the time is an unhealthy way to your mental health deteriorates. Your brain's like any other muscle. You have to use it in order for it to continue to work well, in my opinion. And the Greeks, of course, talked about they originated that term that so many of us know, a healthy mind and a healthy body. And it is certainly true that exercise has been shown to be one of the very best antidotes for deterioration of mental health. because not only do you feel better when you've been working your muscles, the blood as it circulates in an accelerated way based on your exercise clears the brain of a lot of the detritus that can in turn lead to dementia and even slow-wittedness. And so the healthier your brain is, the other way around, but both are true. The healthier your body is, the healthier your brain is going to be. And there are lots of different frames that I have read over and over again in different ways of looking at the different ways that different doctors and different schools have parsed out how the aspects of a healthy person in a healthy mind, what that looks like. One summary, this one, talked about, that I liked, talked about the 4 pillars of a healthy mind, one of which is awareness. And again, that is another way of saying mindfulness. I think, having studied this a good bit and been engaged in an active meditation process for 15 years now, I think that has helped me integrate my awareness into hundreds and hundreds of different small aspects of things. I think the Stoic idea says a lot for, again, how you react. It's not what happens, it's how you react to it. I used to be an extremely impatient waiter. I could not stand in a line for more than a couple of minutes without drumming my fingers and, sighing deeply and expressing that impatience in a way that probably made it uncomfortable for certainly anyone I was actually with, but the people around me, But I learned eventually, for the most part, that stuff that's out of your control, it doesn't help your mental health, doesn't help the people around you to stand around and look disgusted. Things take as long as they take. If you're standing in line at the post office, this is an example from a couple of days ago. Standing in line at the post office, the people have other things to do. They're trying to get stuff done. I waited very calmly, very patiently, that's a new characteristic for me just in the last dozen years or so. And I think it helps me stay healthy, because me being impatient doesn't make the line move any faster. And in fact, it can lead to the opposite result. So there are other things, dozens and dozens of tips, most of which I will not give you. But one of the things that I've started doing lately is in the morning and in the evening, one of the things that recent research demonstrates is that you should use side lighting and red lights if you can, reddish lights if you can, because if you think about the way that the sun arcs through the sky in the early morning, the sun is not directly overhead. So using overhead lights at 6 o'clock in the morning gives your brain the wrong kind of signal. It puts you into the wrong part of the day. And then you go out to drive to work, if you're like most of us slobs, and you're driving, it's been overhead daylight for a couple of hours while you're eating breakfast and having your first pot of coffee. And then you get in the car and it's dark again. Then you get to work and it's bright light again, and it just confuses your circadian rhythm. What we've learned is that the body and the brain is a mechanism that is attuned to all of its surroundings, and all these thousands and thousands of signals that you give your brain. They should synchronize with the world, and certainly that's a point to say that and I know Matt doesn't like the word heathens, but we pagans, we believe that the world is good, and that being in the world is good, and being in this world is a place of joy and happiness. So we should integrate properly into it and not try to bend the world. We do bend the world to our purpose, but some things you can't do, like you can't make the guy at the post office work any faster. So that's the time to be reflective and patient. Um, Next step here is to have interpersonal connection. I've already talked about that some, but um, I can tell you that skipping it. Okay, let me talk about point 3 first, which is insight. This author and I think that they had a lot of good things to say, which is why I'm using their 4-point bulletin here. Insight into yourself. You spend some time in reflection, both in meditation, which I think is an important thing for everyone to do. It has certainly improved my mental health and outlook. I strongly advocate that again. But to have insight into yourself, recognize in yourself the things that need to be adjusted. Like if you are an impatient person, if you're a person who is too loud, too aggressive, you tone that down. If you're not aggressive enough, if you need to get out there and you know, kick ass until you're all out of bubble gum, then you should get out there and do that. Think about yourself and think about these interactions that you have with people. Be reflective about the way that you live your life. Generate insight into the way that you are, into the way that you are around the people that you're around. And then the other 2 points that this guy brought up is having interpersonal connection and having a purpose, which again, and I assume that I can speak at least in some measure for the ulterior Gothi, but the having the AFA in my life has absolutely made things where I feel like where it's worth getting up in the morning. I have a job and kids and all that stuff, all of which also give me purpose. But and again, going back to the evolutionary aspect of human civilization, it wasn't all that long ago where the purpose of your village was to protect the village. The purpose of your men was to protect the women. The purpose of your women was to look out and care for your men and the kids. So people were integrated into a holistic, holy society and civilization, and we've lost so much of that through liberalism. I should have brought Alain de Benoit's book that I just finished, Against Liberalism, where he points out that the liberal experiment has been a total failure in the sense that it has brought us material wealth, but mental instability. People don't know who they are, where they are. I coined the term the tyranny of choice. If you think you can be anything, then it's really too much pressure. You can't. You can be anything within your limitations. You can be an excellent tradesman, and that's perfectly fine. You can be part of an integrated, holistic, whole civilization, and you don't have to be the president or the hero. You can be that cog in the machine, which I feel like I am. In a lot of ways, you can be that person who moves the ball. $20, $50 to VNS helps us keep our mission moving. Showing up to things, encouraging other people to show up to things, that keeps us on our mission, and it gives us purpose and keeps our minds healthy, keeps our souls healthy. The Germanic worldview is that your mind, your memory, your body also are aspects of your soul, and when you can integrate all those parts of your soul into a into I shouldn't use a say. When you integrate it all into an integrated way of doing things, when everything is moving in the same direction, then I think that like anything else that's synchronized, it just moves better and is healthier. That's one of the things that I think is absolutely wrong with the current civilization and certainly the progressive ideology that we've been having shoved down our throats in an accelerated way over the last 20 years or so, creates cognitive dissonance. And that term is one of those things that is a psychological term, meaning that you're trying to believe one thing when you know the opposite is true. And it creates a condition inside your head where your head doesn't get along well with itself. You're trying to believe, not us for the most part, but our civilization is trying to believe things that are not true. A person who's born female can be a man. A person who is born a male can menstruate. Though I try to stay off the politics stuff, but those sorts of psychological disorders have been pushed on us as if it were, as if it were normalcy, as if it were natural, and we know for certain that those things are not true. But if you're trying to be a person who integrates well into mainstream civilization, which I gave up on a long time ago, but if you're trying to integrate into the mainstream and you're being fed those lies, it's the emperor's new clothes. You can see that the emperor is naked, even though everyone around you is admiring the emperor's wonderful clothes. And I think that's the perfect analogy for where our civilization is in a lot of aspects. That being said, I don't think that's true of most of the people in the AFA. I think being around other strong, like-minded, right-minded people gives you the courage, it's certainly given me the courage to stand up to that tyranny of lies that are told to us in those ways. There are some things that are metaphysical certainties that we know to be true, and when mainstream civilization tries to tell us something else, it takes a lot of courage to swim upstream, to swim against the tide, and us standing together can give each other the courage and moral support that we need to maintain our mental health, because that's what we're talking about. I think another aspect of that certainly does fall in with diet. Actually, since we did a show about diet, I've been doing some additional research there. And one of the things that recent research demonstrates is that the lower intestine actually generates a big part of your serotonin. And serotonin is kind of the calmness, integration hormone that when your serotonin machine is working correctly, it helps you feel good. You just feel better about life. And I think that's one of the things that is wrong with the modern diet is when you're eating processed foods, that lower gut bacteria does not get enough nutrition to generate serotonin. And the other happy drugs, okay? Happy hormones, they're not drugs. So eating too much processed food, eating fast foods, being bad to your gut health, that's one of the things that keeps you in a dismal, disaffected, sluggish state of mind. And dietary change is one of the things that takes a long time to start to feel the impact. But having now lived on a healthy diet for 6 years or so, it's worth it. It's worth it 1,000 times over. Um, so, oh, so the other aspect I think in mental health is one other aspect is the ideal of making sure that you limit your contact with screen time. Um, and I just read most of the book. I was sort of aware of most of it, um, called The Anxious Generation. Um, and there are some TED Talks out there on YouTube. That video there has a great summary of the book. This guy, Jonathan Haidt, has done thousands of hours of research into what is wrong with our children. And the unquestionable conclusion is that what's wrong with children is too much exposure to social media. The argument is subtle, but the statistics don't lie. He looks at when social media, especially TikTok and Facebook, when those began to reach into the number of homes that it has currently, the depression rate for 10, 12, 14-year-olds, especially girls, but their depression rate started to climb astronomically. The suicide rate for young children, 10, 12 years old, began to climb astronomically. And if you look at the graphs on that video and in the book, it's no accident. Make sure, like for hundreds of years, those rates were fairly current. Depression rates, suicide rates for young children and teenagers were very slow. And then you hit this inflection point where it goes up and is rising steadily. And it's because girls, especially boys to a lesser extent with different problems, are exposed to constant badgering by predators, number one, and also by the constant message that they are not good enough. And like for most guys, we can absorb a little bit of that. But girls, because their brains are different too, and work differently and respond differently to those sorts of stimuli, girls especially are, when they get exposed to that toxic sort of media, that the toxic ideas that permeate social culture, they get in that headspace where they think they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, they're not pretty, they're too fat. And so all these things that manifest themselves as social anxiety have skyrocketed. Boys have sort of the different problem of then being able to, because the internet, they've gravitated into this gamer culture where, again, it's toxic in a different sort of way. I know he talks less about that because the boys' suicide rate, although climbing, is not climbing as quickly as the way that the girls are, but they have a different sort of toxicity that goes on when when the only social interaction that you have is with a headset and a screen. It's terrible, terrible, terrible for children. Um, he makes some recommendations, which I'll let you watch in the video, which I thank the gods that I got my kids through and raised for the most part before this became so pervasive in the culture. I certainly would have had a lot of very strained arguments with the now ex-wife. And I mean, it was bad enough them just having video games and spending too much time on the computer, but I can't imagine how difficult it would be um, in the modern era. Kids on who are raised on social media don't ever develop the interpersonal skills. And it's simple stuff. And to hear it defined in that video, like learning how to take turns. Okay, that's something that you have to learn when you're playing sports or when you're um, actually out interacting in the world. You don't have to do that when you're one on one with your screen time. Um, Learning how to resolve interpersonal conflict. Those are the sorts of things that you only learn by playing and doing other stuff with kids. And of course, the toxic school culture, I have to skip most of that because I start getting on my own tirade there. And for you guys and so many of you that are taking advantage of the Asatru Academy, God's bless you. It is it is um, the curriculum in the modern schools is a joke. Joseph Sobran summed it up by saying, in 100 years, we've gone from teaching Greek and Latin in high school to teaching remedial English in the university. And they've tried to dumb it down because, no child left behind just means no child gets ahead. You take all the smartest kids in the world, they have to in the room, and they have to learn at the same rate as the dumb kids. They then are bored and it's all tedium for them. And so they get frustrated and act out in all the ways that we see modern culture deteriorating. That's a lot more of a splurge that's a lot more of a monologue than I really wanted to run at the first of it. Wanted to open up to some questions and Matt, some comment from you, but that's
Didn't want to stop you. You were on a roll and you had a lot of things that you wanted to get out there and introduce. And I was making a list of kind of things that I wanted to, I don't know, maybe add my 2 cents on or say a little bit more on. And I suppose, and we do have some questions and we have a lively chat room and there's a lot of things going on. So I don't really know. All right, I'll start at the beginning. I may rethink it and think I should have started at the end, but I think you guys can figure it out. First and foremost, though, Ronald Blake donated 5 coffees and $25 to the VNS Fund. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and it's good to see you back. So, a couple of things. Now, Alan put out a disclaimer at the beginning. I'm going to add on that a little bit. I think it is very, very important for us to be honest and realistic in our approach to things. I don't have a great deal of trust in a lot of current Western medical practice in a lot of ways. I come at it probably from a different place than Alan, probably from a different place than a lot of people, but I think so many things, and especially when we get into the realm of mental health, have been so fundamentally influenced by woke political currents. But when I say that, that gets an idea in your mind of stuff since like 2013, but an overall pervading degenerate wrongheadedness, for a very, very long time in a lot of ways. There are certainly things out there that are worthy of being concerned about, but there's also people out there doing a great job and helping a lot of people in the mental health industry. Sure, be picky, pick and choose, find somebody in keeping with your values, and that may be harder than we would like it to be. But there are people out there that the first step, they need to get some drastic professional intervention. There's people who are struggling with the mental constraints that I think we all feel to one degree or another, that maybe they're losing that battle at present. And then there are deeply deeply damaged people that need medical intervention immediately. If you are one of those people, don't be ashamed. Get some medical help. If you're crazy, let's get it fixed. There's some triage things. There's some people that are so far gone they need to get stabilized before they can start fixing the things that need to get fixed. Don't be ashamed of that. The other thing is medical drugs. Everybody's over on the side. Everybody has different thoughts and feelings about that. I don't think any of us can say that we don't have a problem in this country with people being over or mismedicated with mood-altering pharmaceuticals. That is a big problem. But there's also people that get benefit out of it. What I would say is a lot of the time, conceptually, I'm more comfortable with those kind of things as a short-term, get you through a rough spot things than as a lifestyle choice. But again, Alan nor myself are doctors. There's a lot of stuff out there. Important thing to say is, if you need help, get help. If that help involves something that the purity spiral crowd doesn't like, you still need to get help. And so don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And one of the other things, and this is kind of looping on to some stuff that we talked about in the physical health episode, there are a lot of right answers. There are a lot of different things that work. There's a lot of things that work for different folks. But the important thing is that you move from a state of suboptimal mental health to a more optimal state of mental health. Get there. Let's work together to get each other there and help each other get there. Don't obsess. That's one of the, I've seen that with a lot of the things, and this also relates to the physical health thing. You get these jumbo fatties that, all stressed out because they don't want to get any of the more radical fat loss interventions. No, I don't think the healthy way to lose weight is getting a lap band. I don't think the healthy way to lose weight is Ozempic. But I think being obese is more unhealthy than both of those. So at some point, we need to be realistic about where we're at and take the intervention necessary to get us where we need to go. All that to say, another thing that Alan mentioned that I think is very, very legitimate in the world that we live in, and I forget what it was. I think the tyranny of too many options or whatever he said, something to that effect. And it goes into what I think we've all experienced in this day and age is paralysis by analysis. And that comes into play here. If we're constantly convinced that all of the things in the world that are set up to help us are, somehow not in keeping with the purity spiral that we have in our head of what we should be doing, you can find yourself never doing anything. So focus on something, try to get some help, and work towards it. Now, this goes into the bigger thing that Alan talked about that I think is really important. To be healthy is to be whole. He talked about the linguistics of it and the concept, and we've talked about it very frequently on this program, but it really means just what it says. That means you have a lot of different avenues. If it's hard to get exercise, you can still fix your diet. You can still work on what you're reading and what you're intaking. You can still work on your sleep schedule. If you can't fix your sleep schedule or you've convinced yourself it's not something you want to do, cool. Well, have you worked on your set of friends? Have you gone out there? Have you, increased your prayer and offering practice? Have you engaged with community? There's all of these things that we could all work on that will have a synergetic effect on all of the rest of our health, including our mental health. People in the chat room have mentioned this, but it's very true. doing exercise, getting your physical health under control has a tremendous effect upon your mental health in a variety of ways. Chemically, with the hormones it releases, with the endorphins and the other make you feel good things that it does, but also, you're doing something good. You're making progress on something that you can chart and see progress on. And you also start looking better and having more confidence. There is a myriad benefits of doing that. Do that. It's really important. Something else that I think is tremendously important is it's funny because a lot of these things coalesce around themes. One of the themes that Alan kind of ended his presentation with was the screen culture. And I want to hit that from a little bit different angle, but it's part of that. With the increase in online interaction, we could argue chicken and the egg, but there is a direct, proportional decline in doing things in the real world. And I've watched this amongst young people. This is one of the worst things that I saw increase during the governmental reaction to COVID-19. Man, when you're older, a couple of years doesn't seem like a big deal. Those couple of years when you're in high school, when you're 20, 21, 22, those are some really big, really important years to spend isolated. We were already dwindling in our social skills as a society, and that has rapidly accelerated in that time. I run into this with people in talking about Asatru and talking with our folk, talking with people in chat areas or social media or whatever else. They treat all of the things that they think about from the position of simulation, or treating it as if it's a video game, instead of treating life like a real thing. And this is something that, and I'm phrasing it very imperfectly here, and I apologize for that, but there's all these people with their ideas about what Asatru should be, or what religion should be, or how things ought to work in the world. But far too few of those people have actually tried any of these things in the real world and given anything a fair shot to experience, or to see maybe how reality differs from their theory. I've watched so many people be sad and lonely because the super hot fitness model TikTok influencer is the only way they conceive of, surely I should be able to get a woman like that. And then those aren't the options presented in mom's basement. There's a lot of people that have conceptualized very unrealistic expectations of how the world works, of how relationships work, of how interactions with other men work, how interactions with women work in the real world, how to organically read social cues and figure out how to interact in a room in mixed company in a way that elevates your social status instead of diminishes it. Those are all very real problems. And the enduring mental health salves are actual success in the real world. I've talked about this on the show before too, but I used to work with children. I worked with severely emotionally disturbed children. And one of the things that became evident really quickly. Those kids could take even the smallest things that were real, they could take strength in those when life was tough. But the pretend, make everybody feel better, everybody gets a participation trophy nonsense were instantly meaningless when reality kicked in. I would watch, and the most subtle, no, they won because that day they were the fastest kid or the smartest kid or the strongest kid. That's in the record books. They have that, and they can look back on a real success or a real accomplishment they had in their life. Any of the things we do to placate ourselves with, the good enough, just as good as everybody else, we're all equal trophy provides you zero comfort when you're trying to evaluate your worth in the world. Worth is built on real things and real accomplishments. And I think it's worse for people now. A lot of kids that I went to school with and people who, were my friends in my early adulthood and late teenage years, watched a lot of people that now are in their mid 40s that never really became adults. They never really went out there and did stuff. They all had plans, all the things they were gonna do, things they wanted to do when the right situation presented themselves. And it's, 25 years later and the right situation never came along and they've missed a large part of the meaning of their life because the real world's scary. Interacting with real people is scary. Attempting to do real things is scary. And the longer you put off that fear of getting off mom's couch and going out in the world and doing, the harder it is. So go out and do real things. Touch grass, as the kids say. I don't take the stance that you shouldn't, social media is real and it's here and it's not going anywhere. If it's completely neglected or we pretend it doesn't exist, I think we do ourselves a disservice. But if you allow yourself to be wrapped up and controlled by it, it's literally life stealing. The thing he mentioned about kids with the screen time and specifically with the social media stuff, I agree, but I don't think there's a lot of alternative to being exposed to some of that. I don't think you can avoid it entirely. And I think if you try to, one of the scary things is, and I've seen this in a variety of applications. When parents have the best of intentions and overly shelter their kids from everything that's negative, it is sometimes overwhelming and very destructive when all of a sudden life hits them in the face and they are not prepared and they don't know what to do with it. But what we certainly can do is teach them and contextualize with them. If all they have is social media, that is terrifying. Getting real society for them to be a part of is a huge, huge thing. And a lot of this revolves around, I guess we'll get to this in some of the questions that I've seen come up. But accomplishment makes you feel good. Accomplishment is good for mental health. The other thing that Alan mentioned that I think is really important, I say the other thing, one of the other things is that it's the thing about happiness. Like you can just be permanently high and feel like you're happy all of the time, and you can't risk not being high because you will immediately plummet to the depths of despair. That's not good. It's not just about pleasure. That's important in life and we all want to feel good. But I think in the world around us, we have a tendency to think that's the only good, is like maximum happiness or maximum pleasure. We're not built that way. There's plenty of things in life that you should feel bad about. Those feelings, having real feelings that are calibrated correctly, are a big part of how we're built to become decent men and women and to do good things. It's what strives us forward. You don't want to numb yourself into an artificial state of permanent, elation. Having meaning in life is tremendously valuable, and I think it's very often neglected in the world that we live in. It is harder and harder for men and women today to find meaning in their life, but it's never been more essential for us to be able to find meaning in our life. And I hope that we can do that together. It's certainly a big goal that we try to work towards in the Asatru Folk Assembly. Something else I wanted to mention is truth being one of our virtues. You can't get to a place of healing unless you can have an honest evaluation of where you are. I've seen this a lot too. People pretending that there's something that they're not and refusing to be honest with themselves about where they actually are in the hierarchy of things, in relation to people around them, in relation to who they want to be. And there are a lot of people that think they're better than they are. They do themselves a disservice. But there's also quite a few people that don't realize how good they are, that don't realize their strengths, and that only can see the black or the negative about themselves. And that's also extremely unhealthy and destructive. What I found really beneficial to me personally, this takes it back to Asatru a bit, reading the 9 Doors of Midgard. One of the first things you do in starting that curriculum, and this was developed by Edred Thorson, Dr. Stephen Flowers, is create a list of your positive and your negative qualities and be brutally honest with yourself on both. And as you work your way through that curriculum, and I would say as you work your way through life or through your attempt at healing yourself, check in with that list, I don't know, every month, every so often, to see what you can check off, what you can move into the other column, what stuff you've worked on and made progress. Where are you now in relation to where you were? And consistently do that and check in with yourself and be honest with yourself. If you can't be honest with yourself, then you can't make progress. If you don't know where you are, it's very hard to figure out where you're trying to go or how to get there. So that's very important too. And that's uncomfortable. Facing things about ourselves that we don't like and recognizing them is a really scary and a much more difficult process than I think a lot of people realize. But I do think it's essential. And I salute those of you who are able to do that. And I would encourage those of you who haven't done that yet to take that step, because it's a really important first step. Some other things, but I'd like to get to some of our questions, and I think we can get back to a couple of the things, because I know we have some stacking up. Spear of Votan, do you think there's a link between the mental health crisis that affects our folk and the lack of religion in modernity? How do we help our folk heal? Alan, what are your thoughts on that?
I moved my microphone out of the way. Hopefully I'm not getting feedback if that was why you were muting me there, Nick. I think absolutely that that the lack of religion, one could even say the lack of standard, is a big part of what's wrong with civilization now. But again, it falls back to that aspect of cognitive dissonance that brought us Asatru, that brought us into this frame. When we begin to realize that the doctrines of Christianity do not integrate properly with scientific worldview, um, you want to believe X, but Y is provably true, then it creates a condition where your world and your religion are in separate universes, and that is unhealthy. I think that's where a lot of this world is right now, with the Abrahamic religions. I just, that's, you know, we forget how important it was. The small seems now, but how the teachings of Galileo were suppressed, because when Galileo and others proved that the sun was not the center of the universe, that unwound thousands of years of 8,000 years, 1,500 years of church dogma. Because if the world is not the center of the universe, then God didn't create the world in the way that it was being taught. So, but then, of course, what happened is then as Christianity then spun out of its hold that it had on the life of the European peoples, they then, out of momentum, out of wrongheadedness, cast out all the good things about Christianity. Family centeredness, devotional viewpoint about the way that life is lived, those sorts of things. And again, in Benoit's book on being a pagan, he goes into a lot of that with in a great deal of detail about how casting off Christianity has cast off all the good things of Christianity too. Um, so, yes, absolutely. I think that it is critical to integrate all those things into a proper worldview. I think that Asatru is the way that does that. I think that a devotional lifestyle is absolutely compatible with knowing that gravity works and that quasars are a thing that are far away and black holes exist and all that sort of thing. Um, we, as Founder McNallen always says, we are the people who have made the Faustian bargain. We are the explorers of the world. And that comes from our mindset, which was suppressed, oppressed for a couple thousand years of recent history. And we've now shirked off that burden, but we've lost the good part of that too. Um, so, yes. So the answer to the question simply is yes. I think absolutely that the lack of religion, the lack of standards, um, is a large part of what's wrong with this country and the world at large.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone would argue. I think it's self-evident the lack of religion is a huge part. It has taken people's orientation out, and very often they do not have something to live for. They don't know what to do with their lives. They don't know how to orient themselves. They're taught that there's not objective, good things. There's not a mission in their life. There's nothing bigger than themselves. And it leads to nihilism and hedonism and a lot of things that end up being very unfulfilling. We have a whole lot of people that are extremely unfulfilled and don't know what to do with it. And it's caused a tremendous hole in the soul of our folk. I don't know if there's anything Nick can do with the feedback that we're getting. I apologize for that. Testing. No, it's still pretty bad. Anyways, what I was going to say is the last part of the question, I think, is the most important part. We all know that the world is a worse place for the lack of religiosity in it. But the question is, how do we help our folk heal? And I think when people ask that, I don't know, it's almost phrased in there's some perfect answer that's going to with the snap of fingers fix everything for the whole world, and I don't think it works that way. What we can do to help our folk heal is exactly what we're doing. In the capacity that we possess to create what is lacking and what is broken in the world around us, and to share that creation with our folk and provide the opportunity for our folk to come home and to live healthy and fulfilled. And that's an overriding mission of the Asatru Folk Assembly, and something that we try to do with everything we do. We are trying to bring our folk home to a synchronized whole existence that's authentic, that is lived in troth to our gods, in unity and the recognition that we are part of a folk, we're part of a noble and glorious folk, and that we have amazing, heroic ancestors. We have tremendous gods, and we have a powerful destiny as a people, and to unite behind that and embrace that. We also try to create community to the best ability that we can. What we need is more of our folk to come home and center around more and more places. We're working on that. That's a part of this effort you see us doing with the Hoffs, is to build centers for people to build relationship around, to worship together, to come together with their folk in the worship and celebration of their gods and their heritage. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do at Sigerheim, is bring people together in one place to build a community, so that this isn't a once in a great while thing, that this is an everyday thing and a practice that's woven into the very fabric of all aspects of their life. That's how we help our folk heal. It is not nearly as fast or as sweeping the earth process that I would like it to be. While we look for those opportunities to make big sweeping change that helps, all of our folk, we're going to capitalize on the small victories that we all have in front of us. We all have a different, sets of circles that emanate from us, some bigger, some smaller, of people that we have influence on. I would say most people in the world that we live in have a casual, they know the right things to say. You all laugh and smile at the politically approved subject matter, and you guys can talk about, I don't know, porno or rap videos or whatever is cool to talk about with the sea of modernity out there. That's everywhere, but actual connection of people that you can be authentically yourself with and talk about the things that truly matter and that you truly value is a much rarer commodity. Most people in the world don't have that in their life. They may not even have that with their spouse. They may not be able to even share their authentic self with the person that they're committed to share their life with, or with their family or their children. We're trying to fix that with the AFA. In the AFA, you have the ability to help and to share with hundreds of people who share a common orientation, a common troth to our ICER, a common heritage, and common values. You have access to be helpful in the lives of hundreds of people. The average person out there doesn't have that. Do I wish that was the access to help the lives of millions of people? Certainly, of course I do. But in the meantime, until we get there, I'm very, very thankful that I have the ability to help hundreds of people get their lives closer together. And each of those people have their own circles of family and friends that should be coming home to the Asatru Folk Assembly, but that they can affect and build change in. It emanates out from those of us willing to make the effort to make the change and to help the people. Each of us have the opportunity to do it. When we do it through the Asatru Folk Assembly, every member of the AFA is magnified in their ability to help others by hundreds of times. Next, how does diet and exercise affect mental health in your personal experience? Alan?
Well, in my personal experience, it has made a tremendous difference. Since my divorce, 2012, you know, I did go through a period of sluggardliness, and where I think both my diet and my work, my physical health suffered a great deal. But then once I got back on the program of where I was working out a lot, and then recently went through a thing called the strenuous life, where I was required by the tenets of that program to get an hour of physical activity every day. I could see my health improve even greater on the margin. And also, when I stopped eating bad, and more vegetables, more diet, more salad, more fiber, all that stuff. And it sounds boring and tedious, but it's boring and tedious because it works. It's stuff that you hear everywhere. It's advice that everybody gives, because it does work. The carnivore diet I played with for a while, and it helped me make a couple of things. But again, it was a bridge to a healthier lifestyle, which now involves, again, a meditation practice, an hour of physical activity or more every day. Went to the gym last night, and even though it's 96 degrees here in sunny Florida and 104% humidity, I can still do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups. But it's so to be able to and then you feel good. It's a feedback loop, because you do this physical stuff, and that helps you feel better about yourself. Just the idea of, okay, wow, I didn't think I could walk for 5 miles, but I did. And so you can then feel better about that physical accomplishment, and doing the physical stuff makes your body feel better. Eating, and again, challenging yourself to eat a better diet gives you that feedback, because wow, I hate salad, but I plowed my way through that one, and it wasn't that bad. And then you can feel like you've accomplished something. And again, the salad itself will make you feel better in the long run. Standing in front of a cold shower and taking a cold shower in the morning, this is the time to start that practice. um, you know, Again, that's that kind of thing. You start the day with a physical challenge. This is going to suck. And sometimes it does suck, but then you've started the day by defeating your own willpower. So all those things, not only does it affect your body in the sense that eating better makes your body better, it affects your mind by making that challenge work for you.
And I'm glad that you asked this on a personal level, because I think that diet and exercise is good for everybody, but I think it probably stands out on the ways it benefits different people differently, or the ways that you notice, at least. So I'm gonna start where I am now and kind of work my way back. I think that diet stuff helps me have a routine and feel like I've got a roadmap to success and something to follow to help not stress about the particulars of what ifs. It gets me out of my head a little bit. And I think that getting used to your diet and used to when to splurge and how to splurge to affect your mental health and to affect things is important. Because I'll do that. I'll be really strict on my diet for a time, and then I'll just have a rough day, and I'll be like, you know what? You know what fixes a rough day? Fat and carbs fix a rough day. And they do if it's a once in a while thing. Sometimes that releases a certain amount of dopamine. It just makes you feel better. And being able to recognize in yourself when that's helpful versus when it's just the unintended. Something Alan mentioned earlier is, mindfulness. When we just graze on crap all of the time because it's there, because we don't think about it, or because we're undisciplined, a lot of things get out of control really quick. When you're able to, diagnose like, man, you know what, today I'm gonna splurge a little bit. That breaks it up. If you're always at a level 10 on your fat and carb dopamine level, then you don't have anywhere else to go. If you're like, man, I'm having a bad day, what am I going to do? You're out of options. But if you keep it in check, then you can alter those things in ways that you need to help. The other thing I'd say, though, on the exercise part, going to the gym helps my mental health tremendously. It gets me out of whatever I'm stressing about in a place where I can focus on physical exercise. It does all of the things physically that's good about it. But mentally, it is something that I can do every day to say I did, I accomplished, I was there, I made it happen. I can write down, I have one notch in the win column every day I go to the gym. And also, I'm a gym guy. There's a lot of people like to work out by themselves, and if that helps them, then that's great. I like being in the gym. I like being around other people who are doing something good, other people who are good looking, who are working to make their life better, who are working to be athletically more proficient or to be in better shape or to accomplish things, or even the people who are there that aren't there yet, people who are clearly out of shape, but who are in there making the effort to get in shape. Those people are inspirational too. It's kind of an environment where everybody is in there making an effort, and it separates them from the vast majority of people in the world that just don't care. That's nice. That puts me in a society where I feel like for that moment at that time, I'm surrounded by winners, and that inspires me to feel good, to push more, to try to be better. And it's really strengthening that way to me. Also, the martial arts that I do help a lot because, again, it gets me out of my head. It's a set period of time where I have to focus on a physical activity that I want to get proficient at and do well. I have to focus on a series of movements and doing them correctly, or else I'm liable to hurt myself or someone else. So I'm really in the moment. I'm very present there. And I mentioned before struggles with meditation. It's really important to me to find something that takes me out of my own head. I don't do good at just sit and release all your thoughts. That's a much easier thing that's said than done. It's much better if I have something to focus intensely on, to where I'm focusing on one thought, but I'm hyper focused on it. And it's not related to the stresses of the day. It's related to perfection of movement and technique. And that's really important. But in my life, tremendously, I was lame. I was skinny, fat loser that was not living authentically. All of the things that I admired and the man that I wanted to become, and the things that I admired in men I looked up to, I was the furthest thing from. And I was doing nothing to fix that. When I started to, I don't know if I can get there, but if I start trying, I'll be a lot closer than I am now. That helped me so much in my life because it changed the way I looked at the world and the way I looked at myself. I conceived for the first time, like, hey, I can be more than I am. I can make myself I can build myself into something more and something better than I am. I can learn to become the things that I idolize instead of just sitting in the stands and cheering. I can do something. And that was tremendous for my mental health. It was tremendous for my sense of self-worth, for my self-confidence. I've told the stories on here a number of times, but I went out and I tried to be that person and get better and get bigger and get stronger and do the things. And I think, yeah, I got bigger and I got stronger, but I also had self-confidence. I had my chest out and my head up, and I felt like I was somebody, and I didn't walk around like a loser. Every bad thing in this world looks for victims, and they look for the easiest targets to victimize. Your life changes tremendously when you have self-worth and self-confidence. The way you carry yourself makes all the difference in the world on how others treat you. And there's no magic cure-all that fixes that. It's a complex matrix of things. But in my life, getting in the gym and trying to become bigger and stronger helped me in that tremendously. And I'm very grateful that I had other men around me to help, show me how to do that and work out with me. Those think about you, Jeff, Tony, guys that I used to go to the gym with by myself when I didn't know what I was doing, that helped show me the way on stuff. I really appreciate that. Can you speak on men's mental health specifically? Society at large doesn't take it seriously. Men are often laughed at for their problems. What is your take on that, Alan?
Yeah, I know we're the last group that you can pick on and feel like you can get away with it. I think a lot of the criticism against men is completely unfounded. I think it's laughable to talk about toxic masculinity in this hyper feminized culture. I think it's certainly true that we men, and I count myself in this group, are too reticent. We're too hesitant to seek help when we need help. For when we feel, I don't want to. Yeah, when I use the term depressed, I don't mean in the clinical sense, but when we feel bad about stuff, when we feel like we need help, it's we've been taught wrongly that it's a sign of weakness to seek help. I think that's a part of it. I think that's absolutely one of the things that the gym culture helps you overcome. When you can, because you can go to those guys. How do I do this? How does this machine work? Part of, for me, part of it too was car culture. How do I fix this? How does this thing work? And guys will help other guys. And, one of the things about guys that guys know is we like helping other guys, right? So, it's flattering to Matt, I know, and some noob comes up to him at the gym and says, how do I do this? You look like you're doing the right thing. Help me with that. It's and those are the kinds of things that guys can reinforce their idea of self-worth by, short story. When I got divorced, one of my friends that seemingly I've lost touch with, not through any fault of my own, but he called me and said, "Hey man, I'm gonna come down and see you." It's like, okay, what's going on? Nothing. I just want to come down and spend some time with you. And it's just one of those things. He had been through a divorce. He knew that that's a bad time in your life. And so he just came down, we hung out, got drunk, um, acted stupid. So, and again, and it helped me. It helped me both in the short term idea of getting through that depressing time, but also it just helped me to know that there was somebody who cared enough about me to want to come down and make sure I was doing okay. So those are the kinds of things um, that we in the culture of the AFA are trying to overcome those sorts of stigmas. We tell each other all the time, if you need help, ask me. Um, I am not the data savvy guy. I've gotten over my fear of hurting Nick's feelings when I call and ask him to, help me do something simple and I'll call Cliff and make him go click by click through how to make this machine work. We definitely, um, I think a lot of that was the myth, and a myth it was of of the guys in the 50s who were seen supposedly as these islands of masculinity who didn't need help, didn't want help, and, but that's not true, because even back then they were integrated into a society of men. You know, they knew the mechanic, they knew the carpenter, their dad knew people. They were integrated into a textured, structured, integrated matrix of men who would help each other. So the idea that, that we are islands of, total self-reliance is just false. And we don't, and it takes a long time to overcome the idea that it's that we're somehow less if we need to ask somebody for help on how to make stuff go. I think though being stronger in yourself, being stronger in the way that you integrate into a right worldview as promulgated by the AFA can help you in the sense that you can understand that when other people criticize, the normies, the NPCs criticize or look askance at you for holding the right worldview and acting right and speaking truth and doing all the things that a strong man does. When they criticize you, they're the ones who are failures. It's not us, it's them. And being in our society, the society of the AFA, can help you maintain that strength in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone here, everyone who's going to listen to this understands. Heterosexual white men are the people that all of the forces of everything wrong in the world have chosen to target as the big baddies. That is a testament to the fact that heterosexual white men are the pillars of society and of what makes all of the good things in the world good, at least in a non-divine sense. What Alan said, I think, is really important, though, about men's health. We have what is toxically masculine is trying to endlessly posture, even when it's laughable, and being the loser alpha in your middle of nowhere, non-participating form of existence you've carved for yourself, but you woulda, coulda, shoulda, and if you were there, you'd do it all better. We got a whole lot of guys that are scared to try, because when you try and you're in the company of other men, your bubble gets popped that maybe you're not the best. Maybe you're not the smartest. Maybe you're not the strongest. Maybe you're not the fastest. Maybe you're not the expert in the room. And that's okay. There's only one person in the world that is the strongest. There's only one person in the world that is the smartest. And chances are none of us are either of those. But going out there and participating, you can accomplish. Pretending that you're too cool for school makes you a loser. It makes you seem really cool in high school, maybe, but as an adult, it holds you back from participating in the world in a meaningful way. You don't have to, it takes all sorts. There's going to be, a few leaders and there's going to be a lot of followers, and that's okay. In fact, that's noble. If you devote yourself as a free man to following someone that you recognize their greatness or you recognize their ability and you get on the team, there's a tremendous amount of honor in that. There's zero honor in thinking you're too cool for it and living out your existence on the internet in your mom's basement in your fantasy land. But that's scary. A lot of people, I joke on here and I always make the mom's basement jokes or whatever, but I'm serious. And I think that we all face this. I know I face this. I know this is something that I've had to work really hard to overcome. Sitting on the couch is seductive, not participating because there's always, we are capable of deluding ourselves in a very efficient way. There's infinite reasons for you not to try, for you not to get up, for you not to get out of bed, for you not to do anything. We can come up with and imagine the most amazing and spectacular reasons not to do things. But we do that at our own peril because, life isn't infinite. We have a limited amount of time here in Midgard to accomplish and work our will. And the world and the forces of chaos seek to seduce us into complacency. Men's health is in large part about men doing and engaging in life in a way that is meaningful and has purpose. Another thing I see that has been really tragic to men's health, and probably always has, but I think there was a context for it that isn't anymore. There's a whole lot of people that are wage slaves that go out there and prioritize their existence in the workforce over everything else, but often they're engaged in work that's very unfulfilling for them. And not knowing what to do, they sometimes hide in that work at the detriment of being there for their families, at the detriment of developing themselves as a person or being part of the things that they would conceive that they'd like to be part of in their lives. They sublimate all of that to throw themselves into becoming an economic unit because that's been beat into them, that's the ultimate expression of manhood is slaving away at an unfulfilling profession for all of your good years and with all of your time. And that's really unfortunate. And economic realities are what they are. I don't look down on anybody for working hard. Please don't anybody think that. But life is about a lot more than that. And sometimes it's hard for men to make time to do that or to allow themselves to do that. Question. Odin is the god of ecstasy, ecstatic frenzy, or divine madness. How does such an understanding square with our modern sentiments and concerns about mental health, such as this very episode? Alan, what are your thoughts?
The opportunity for battlefield frenzy is greatly diminished in the current iteration of civilization. I think that it has to be, just as a practical matter, that sort of thing has to be damped down and put into its place. That being said, there are models, and where martial arts is certainly an outlet for that. And meditation in its own way, divine frenzy is, again, sublimated and channeled in Kundalini meditation, you know, and actually the greater picture of that question, if I understand the frame of it, is something that I have given some time to think about too, because, we are a warrior culture. Um, there are a lot of people out there who need to have their attitude adjusted, but we're just not allowed to do it. And, uh, it's, it's unfortunate that right action like Daniel Penny took in that subway in New York is often rewarded with prosecution and belittlement and can't think of the right word, prosecution by the world at large, because again, the world at large, the civilization is out of adjustment. Um, yes, it's a struggle. That's the right way to say it. Although I frankly tend to model Tyr more in my daily life, the god of sacrifice and victory, the god of right order. Um, it doesn't mean that given the opportunity that I wouldn't uncork on somebody, but it's just got to be, we just have to know that that where we are in the civilization means you just have to subordinate that reflex.
So I think some of this comes with a misunderstanding of the Allfather. Um, I don't feel that he was ever conceived of as madness and craziness. It was always that he was the master of those things. He is the master of frenzy, the master of ecstasy. He consumes, thrives on ecstatic frenzy in a inspirational, in a divine sense, but he's able to channel it to purpose. One of the overriding things in the lore about Odin is his ability to take chaos and shape it into will and order and structure. He does that throughout the creation of Midgard, throughout structuring just the right order of the cosmos, and our inclination is noble and ordered people. One of the things, and certainly ecstasy and madness are fundamentally linked to Odin because he inspires those things, but those things in terms of overwhelming drive to do, to accomplish. And I think that we all know that the line between crazy and touched by the divine is paper thin, and often people are kind of on either side of it because it is such a challenge to be able to control that energy. I think it also speaks to the All-Father that, unlike the other gods, he has two pet wolves that sit at his throne. And their names mean like ravenous and devouring. And but again, he has these, and throughout our myth, these wolves are these devouring forces of uncontrolled, just consumption and overwhelming instinctual murderous destruction. He keeps them at bay as pets. They sit as obedient pets at the seat of his throne and eat his scraps because he is able to control those extreme impulses and
channel them right, and channel it into right order.
So I think that's how I conceive of him in terms of mental health, and I think it's instructive in that way. What do you suggest for preemptively addressing mental health with young men going into the military or into the world in general as they're stepping away from home and out into the world? Alan?
It seems to me, and I been a long time since although my young ones are, getting to that point where they're finally leaving the nest. But when they're at that cusp, when they're leaving for the military, it's way too late to give them that, that because we all think we're gonna, kind of put your arm around the shoulder, give them a few sentences of fatherly or unclely advice, and that's going to just pivot them on their heel, and they're going to suddenly transform into something worth being. um, it's it's the thousands and thousands of days, the hundreds and the thousands of interactions from infancy to that point. That's where you shape the man. That last little boost out of the nest, I mean, you might be able to make a little 1% inflection in the way that they're going out there. And there's certainly good advice that men in the AFA who have been in the military, they can give those guys. Um, Men in the AFA who have been to college, if I was given a few sentences of advice to guys going to college, I could maybe help them have a better experience. But it begins in the crib or in the co-sleeping bed, and all the way out through their youth and adulthood. And by the time they're 18, 20 years old, you're way behind the curve if you're just starting there.
Yeah, I mean, what Alan said is certainly true on that. Um, it's hard to summarize like what quick advice you'd give to take men from infancy into combat or into thrusting them into the world. What I think is really, I don't mean this as cheesy of an answer, but I think that addressing this in specific is the have 'em all. The have 'em all is, I would say it's the easiest to relate to piece of our lore, and it's literally in large part advice to young men who are going out into the wide world for the first time, who are leaving home and their community and traveling, who are finding themselves on the road, who are having to be in the company of other men, of elder men in a warrior society, who are having to experience, their first encounters with women and how to navigate that. I think it's a really profoundly useful text, and one of, I would say, quite a few people's favorite piece of our lore. It's probably the most quoted piece of our lore because it has these pearls of wisdom in it that I think especially young men going out in the world can find useful. I think that's the simple answer, and the more complex answer really depends on the guy in the conversation. Our Gothar spend hours and hours and hours trying to address what you're asking, depending on the young man that they're ministering to and trying to help. What do you think of people using AI for therapy, Alan?
No.
So,
And to elaborate, um, they're already detecting all of the flaws in the way that AI has been programmed. And the easy example from for our own people is somebody said, "Give me a picture of a Viking," and the Viking comes back and he's black. Okay, false. Um, I not I'll say it this way. I did a search on the internet for the meaning of a particular term that I just wanted to be able to define in a couple of sentences. And when I plugged it in, the AI came back with the inverse of the definition that I knew that what it was. AI has been demonstrated to be hyper woke. It's programmed by our enemies. It's controlled by our enemies. Don't do it.
So I am less Luddite than our. No, but so in all honesty, though, with technology stuff, I do think I'm a little bit more lenient on technology than Alan tends to be. But let's assume the best of AI, which it's not. It's everything Alan says it is. I hope one day that we awaken some real AI that breaks free of those chains. And I think if it develops in other parts of the world, there's possibilities for it to get past the wokeness. I think it is a extremely useful tool in computations and in a lot of other ways that will be increasingly relevant in the world around us, but it is particularly ill-equipped for therapeutic purposes. The fact that one is consulting AI for therapy is the problem. One of the biggest things, and we talked about this on the program so far, your ability to connect with other humans is the core to your health and your integration into the world. You having to go to AI to get your therapy is part of the problem. Now, if you're using AI to say, hey, can you make me a list of therapists in my area and give me their numbers? Okay. Hey, can you pull up a paper on this interesting mental health thing I was reading? Okay. But as far as providing therapy, that is a uniquely personal thing. And I would say even human beings, the more that they are emotionally removed and sterilized in their ability to express human expression, they are disproportionately able to provide therapy. You need another person who is able to relate to you in a human way to provide meaningful therapy. And I truly, truly believe that of all the things that AI may be very, very good at, this is the one they are probably most inherently bad at doing, is being not AI. Yeah, I think it's a real misuse of that technology. Can you touch on how to overcome limiting beliefs in order to achieve more while staying realistic about who you are and where you're at in life? Alan.
Well, I think part of it is setting realistic short-term goals, seeing those sorts of things as victories. If your goal is to be able to bench press 250 pounds, and you go to the gym and the first lift you try is 250 pounds, you're not going to get there, and it's going to be a permanent fail. But if you can get in there and bench press 50 pounds, that's 50 more than you did last week. And those sorts of incremental victories, you just have to use as a, cycle. I think trick or manipulation gives the wrong connotation for the most part, but that's what you're doing, is you're tricking your brain into feeling good about those small accomplishments. Like when I first started running wind sprints, I couldn't run for a 30-minute set. I had to do 10, but now I can do a 30-minute set of wind sprints, and but I didn't get there starting off that way. I just, I did a little more every day. The same thing, with this weight loss program I've been on, I, you have to think of it as not, I'm going to lose, like, even though the overall goal may be to lose 50 pounds, you don't lose 50 pounds, you don't go from X to a 50-pound loss, you lose a couple ounces a day. You take in one notch of your belt and you can feel that psychological feedback that says, man, I'm actually doing something. And it's with it like, and it's with every aspect. The education, you don't open the calculus textbook till you've been through algebra. And it builds on itself, and those small victories will allow you to climb the hill. You eat that elephant one bite at a time.
I want to chime in because I'm supposed to, but I think, Alan touched on it beautifully. The thing I'd say is don't set a top limit for yourself. Even if logically there is one, that's fine. Have the ability to dream of greatness, but realize where you are. There's a either or thing to where people think you either need to be realistic, and when they say realistic, they mean pessimistic, or you just need to have this blind optimism that can ultimately be very defeating when life hits you in the face. But you can do both. You can realize where you are, pick attainable goals to work towards, and in the meantime, when you have time left over, work on that dream thing. If you want to be in the NBA, but you're a white dude and you're 5'4" and you're, not necessarily good at basketball, it's probably a hard thing, but go for it. In your free time, if that's what you want to do, train up, do those things. But in the meantime, pick something that you can do and put yourself towards that. You can pursue.
Work on your three-pointer.
Sure, go for it.
I just said if your goal is to be in the NBA, work on your three-pointer, your three-point shot.
Yeah, you could also work on, I don't know, you can get a tan, get really tan. But in complete seriousness, the idea of picking because I think that when we're talking here, we're not being silly. We're talking about actual things that you really, really wish but are highly unlikely. And that's okay. Having dreams that are unlikely is fine, as long as you have a practical thing to do in the meantime and are not squandering your life on unrealistic things. And hopefully it breaks for you. And the more you put in the work, the less unlikely it becomes. But the thing about progressive overload is important that Alan mentioned. It's the foundation of all weight training. Milo of Croton used to pick up a calf every day. It was a newborn baby calf. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to pick this calf up every single day. And, it's hard to conceive of that one day to where you were able to pick him up yesterday, but all of a sudden today you can't pick him up. So it's hard to logically conceive of what that day is to where why can't you pick up a bull? Milo did it. So that's a thing, but he did it by every day. This cow gets a little bit bigger and he goes, picks him up. What Alan said, if your goal is to bench 250, you go in there and try to bench 250 and you've never bench pressed before, you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to feel defeated and feel like a loser. I'll tell you what, I do this. I got all man joints. So every time I start a new thing, if it's a bar exercise, I start with just the bar. Then I add 10 pounds. Then I add the 25s. Then I do the 25s with the 10s. Then I do the 45s. And I'll do that on each set over however many weeks until I get to where my actual working weight is. And I've accustomed my joints and accustomed myself to know where I really am. And then you make progress from there. But recognizing, I mentioned this earlier with mental health, all of those dreams, all of those other things, what makes it work and healthy is having a real understanding of where you are currently. I wouldn't want to stifle anybody's ability to dream, but know where you are and work with where you are, not where you wish you were. What advice would you give to parents who want to make sure they raise good kids who will be less likely to have some of the mental illness that affect modern society? Alan.
That's tough when, I think that it's much worse now, would be much harder than even when I was raising my now, 30 and 25-year-old. Both because the progressivist mindset has just inundated everything. And even though it is objectively wrong, it seems to latch hold on the mainstream. Now, that being said, I don't. I still think that the vast majority of white culture in this civilization is overwhelmingly conservative. We pretend otherwise, and some people, and just say it, a lot of women are caught up because they have that overwhelming psychological need to fit in with the mainstream. But remember how you were raised. That's my dad made lots of mistakes. My mom did too, but for the most part, they did a half decent job. I raised my kids and Tallahassee's a fairly liberal town. I raised my kids in a very conservative manner, but I've had, I bet you 20 people, 20 adults come up to me and say, I ran into Preston at the mall, and he's just so respectful and so well spoken, all that. So raise them with standards. That may be the short summary, without going into detail. Don't let them slide into the easy culture of doing too little, doing nothing. Make them help around the house. Expect more from them, and they will live up to it. Discipline. And discipline is not necessarily spanking your kids. Discipline just means if they mess up, there are consequences. And also, you guide them along the path. Discipline also means that, you remind them gently to start with, as much as necessary, about what is expected of them. And that's what, so you can, I think that, if you talk to them as reasonable, as young people, and don't baby them and helicopter over them and let them run a little bit, then they will manifest those standards and become pretty decent kids. Mine did.
So, praise the ice when it's crossed. My daughter's 5, so keep that in mind when listening to my, longer term parental advice. But what I think is very, very important is giving them a sound home base to relate to learn from, to come back to. Getting them, and so all of these things, I shamelessly plug the AFA as like the answer to all the world's problems. But if I didn't believe that, this is not where I'd be sitting and what I'd be doing with my time. I believe the AFA is the answer to these problems. Raise your kids with the gods in their life from day one. Raise them around a group of other people who share those values and beliefs, so they don't feel isolated or different or odd. All of the impulses to fit in, have them try to fit in with the group of people you've selected to have in their life. And be the example that you want them to become. If or the inverse, be the example of who you want them to become, or be the example of who you want them to marry. Be that. Um, and don't just be that when you're talking to them, be that in your life, be that, you have eyes on you all the time. Be that. I think that one of the things that's terrifying to me, and I think is scary to a lot of people, a lot of parents, is kids go through this rebellious stage. And in doing that, they can make some choices that they can't unmake, unfortunately. One thing that I think is really important towards that, if you're constantly preaching at your kids about whatever extreme position you have on stuff, that can be off-putting and something for them to rally behind, like opposing when they're trying to be rebellious. But what I think sneaks past that conscious process is example that they absorb unconsciously through observation and growing up and figuring out what normal is and what feels good. Give them a home base with you, your family, and hopefully your AFA family, to where they can look back and say, hey, I remember this growing up, and that made me feel safe. That made me feel good. I felt fulfilled during that. I want to get back to that. That's how I want to raise my kids. Give them something to come home to that they recognize as good and healthy and nice. And I think the example is huge. There's a million different ways to answer this question depending on what the particular problem that you face is. But I think that's a really sound place to start on it. Austin in Wisconsin donated $30 to the general fund. Thank you, Austin. We appreciate it very much. Okay. I don't understand the context of the next question in the queue, Nick, so maybe you can type me up some context for it.
There wasn't any. He just randomly asked it.
So Swan asks, was this pertaining to microdosing psilocybin? If not, what is your thoughts on that? Alan, would you like to take a stab at what he was referencing and then your thoughts on microdosing psilocybin?
We do not officially condone the use of that illegal.
Keep in mind, we have an international audience.
I think that particular intoxicant is illegal just about everywhere. That being said, here's what I can say. I'll say two things, at least. There is a lot of promising research out there about microdosing psilocybin, that psilocybin has been shown to have lots of promise, regrowing neurons in the brain, aiding in lots of traumatic situations, PTSD. It's been shown to be extremely helpful. At some point in personal, what is it called, IRL? When I'm IRL with some of you guys, I will tell you some of the personal experience that personal experience I've read about. I am familiar with personal experience with microdosing that is extremely helpful. And frankly, I think that is one of the worst negative externalities of Christian culture, where any form of entheogen was decried, because herbal stuff was all, outlawed by the church. So, sorry, that's a long, wandering answer to the fact that, yes, Swan.
Don't ask glowy questions. I think that's what the kids call them. So, I have no idea what the context was for the first half of the question as far as it being helpful. And I don't know if my thoughts on it relate to specifically microdosing or to its use generally. But no, I think it has tremendous. So to follow along with the law speaker's, caveat, the Asatru Folk Assembly would never advise you to do anything that is illegal in the jurisdiction that you find yourself in. But I just think as an objective just statement of truth being one of our virtues, I think it's probably very beneficial to a lot of people. I don't know if it's beneficial to every person in every circumstance. There is a tremendous benefit to be had from its proper use. But again, we would not advise you to do illegal activities in the jurisdiction that those activities are illegal. I think the point that Alan made, though, about, and this is why I mentioned an international audience, not psilocybin specifically, but a number of different hallucinogens are legal in Mexico, and we have a lot of soldiers that come back with a lot of problems that they're working through that go into Mexico and South America to get those kind of therapies with tremendous results on things that they're going through. So, I think that what I'm saying is factually true. Again, I'm not encouraging you to do anything illegal. We would certainly not encourage you to do that. But as a statement of fact, those of you with kids, do you think it might be smarter to not let them have a smartphone or a tablet until they're a bit older to avoid becoming addicted to this stuff or being influenced by wrong ideas? Alan, express your thoughts on this.
Surprisingly enough, yes, I agree. To begin with, as a matter of just coherent principle, I think you should not let your kids have technology that is past their age. What that book demonstrates, what all the psychological studies show is, and I always use that phrasing advisedly, like I would never say studies show that blah, 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 without having looked at several of the studies. That guy's book, that video said, and his advice as a psychiatrist practicing in the field is that no child under the age of 14 should get anywhere near a smartphone. They should, if they need to call you, they can have a flip phone. They can text with their friends. They can be in contact with you, and get a ride and whatever, and make phone calls and texts with a flip phone. Okay, and they should not be on social media at all until they're 16. In the exact same way that alcohol is okay, right? But you don't give alcohol to a 4-year-old. I think microdosing should be legal, but I wouldn't microdose a 6-year-old. Okay. Social media is a contagion. It is a virus that is controlled by our enemies that is overwhelmingly psychologically addictive and is provably shown to be harmful, probably harmful to almost all adults who use it to any extent, but absolutely unquestionably harmful to children. And one of the documentaries that I watched, and I mean, I am advisedly a Luddite. I use electricity, but I don't plug my brain into it. Anyway, one of the things that I watched, there's a documentary out there, and I think it's called The Social Media or something along that line. But Meta or Facebook has teams of psychiatrists. They have hundreds of psychiatrists and psychologists whose whole life is dedicated to keeping people addicted to Facebook. And I don't care how strong or loose your supervision is, you cannot supervise your kids enough against a team of 300 psychiatrists who are trying to keep them glued to that screen. So and again, it's easy for me to say, I guess, because I don't have kids that age, but all the research shows that it is terrible, terrible, terrible to their own self-image to see, because if you think about what Facebook is, what social media is, the thing that gets millions of likes, right? It's the one guy at the gym who can lift 800 pounds. Okay. And so what kids then they are subjected daily, hundreds of those images, thousands of those videos that show stuff they can't do. Okay. So number one, it's detrimental, just the exposure of it in and of itself is detrimental to their psychology. Number two, and I hadn't even thought about this till I watched that video, but it's the substitution effect. If your kid spends 2 hours scrolling around on Facebook or watching TikTok, that's 2 hours that they could be doing their own stuff, drawing, learning an instrument, playing pickup football somewhere. So the answer is I'm opposed. And I know that is not necessarily the popular viewpoint, but I think it is the right one.
So, I think Alan and I differ on our use of social media for adult people, but that's not what the question's about. I think that it can be a tremendous tool for adult people to advertise or to network or to do certain things across distance. And I certainly think that other apps on a smartphone are really convenient just for stuff like maps when you're driving, all kind of things. You have Google at your fingertips to research anything you want. You've got a powerful thing there. But I've watched it ruin the lives of many adults that aren't mentally well equipped to handle it, how much more so children that don't have the context for it. We live in one of the really bad things about social media and about the internet is the democratization of stuff. And the other team talks about that like that's some awesome accomplishment. It's not. It means every loser out there, if they're willing to devote more time than you than sitting in front of a screen, all of a sudden their opinion, their thought, their view of the world is magnified to a unrealistic degree to where they're disproportionately represented. And I think that's really scary when they influence children. I don't think we're necessarily well served making hard and fast rules about tools that can be, technology changes all the time. But the fundamental, I think, is those things and their access to the social media, like Alan mentioned. And, I perhaps legitimately, surprisingly, tend to agree with Alan on this when it comes to their ability to connect. Having a tablet so that your kid can watch videos that you approve of and you load on the tablet for them is one thing, but having them have the access to interface with other dangerous people out there is not good. There are a lot of people seeking to prey on your children. There are a lot of people seeking to prey on them sexually, to prey on them in a variety of ways. There are other children that are not emotionally well developed that feel better by making other kids feel terrible, and that is amplified tremendously to devastating effects by social media for children, especially young girls. But you have a much more subtle corrupting children by constant displaying of them everything that you would teach them is bad, and the villainization of everything that you think is good. No, I think that's really dangerous for kids. I understand at some point in their teenage years, there's some kind of a transition period where they are more able to handle that than other times. But if there were a way to forever shield my daughter from having to deal with social media, I would like to do it. And I realize that's probably not the world she's going to live in when she grows up and is an adult, but I'd like to protect her from it for as long as I can without making her, incompatible with understanding how to navigate basic social functions. But yeah, I think that, and again, the key being the interfacing with social media, that is a constant assault. Alan mentioned that they have teams of people to keep you psychologically addicted. And to hear that, like, oh, that's crazy stuff. That's just sinister, evil villains in some cabal. It's easy to conceive of it that way, but not really. It doesn't have to be that sinister on the face of it. That's what any marketing is. But they happen to have the most addictive, most dopamine reinforcing, most highly manipulative form of marketing that they've ever had access to before. I don't think they conceive of it as something evil, but it is weaponized by opportunistic people in a profoundly overwhelming way. And I would really advise that you keep your kids off of that aspect of stuff until, they're well into their teenage years, and then, really judiciously using your judgment on it. Scott Thatcher says, Norse paganism, Germanic heathenry, and Asatru are all synonyms and interchangeable to me. What does the AFA say? It depends on what the audience is, Scott. The AFA says that, yes, fundamentally they're interchangeable. We should all use the term Asatru because Asatru unites us behind one thing instead of confusing people with, a myriad of other different snowflake versions of it. There's a variety of words that could have been chosen, but Asatru is what we've got. Asatru is what's brought us here. Asatru is what we're moving forward. The use of the other terms just serve to confuse and, get folks to ask the question you're asking right now. Now that is, again, there are people deeply entrenched in those things, and they mean different things, and there's kind of a colloquial understanding. In what seems to be common, very new people that don't know better often use the term Norse paganism. More often than not, people who use the term Norse paganism are, I don't know what the nice term is, progressives. They tend to be people very far on the left. That's my experience with the term Norse paganism. Again, it's not every one of them because it's not literally false. It's just a term that has seemed to galvanize in those circles a bit more. Germanic heathenry is much more of a mixed bag on people that want to call themselves that. I think, again, it's not linguistically incorrect, but it diffuses what we're doing and it adds in a lot of confusion. I don't think it helps. And it, again, is defining things as they relate to something else as opposed to us positively defining ourselves by our values and what we do. It's other people describing us as, those people out on the heath doing their crazy stuff. But again, everybody probably has a reason why they do what they do. What I found a lot of the time is when people refuse to call it Asatru, sometimes it's because they just want to be, you know, they don't want other people to tell them what to do. They're very individualistic and they don't want to conform and get on the team. And a lot of people do that for a variety of different reasons. And a lot of people have that kind of impulse hardwired in. What I will say is, as of the infamous White Babies Facebook post of 2017, I think 2016 actually, we have heard chatter at the time from a lot of from folks over in the Troth and in other universalist left-wing pagan circles that they were intentionally distancing themselves from the term Asatru because it inherently was being used by folkish people and by people with our worldview, which is another strong reason for me to keep trying to get everybody to use the term Asatru. Alan, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I agree with you 100%. I know that you and I quibble about some of the other linguistic stuff, but I agree 100% that Asatru's the brand. If we could go back 50 years and pick a different word, we might, but you know, like, but I'm good with it as, as the descriptor for the narrower, I think, and I think you described it correctly. But for folkish heathenry, Asatru is the word. This is the way, and we are the folk.
Do you think making goals in life and working hard to achieve them is good for our mental health, Alan?
Unquestionably. And I think that as corny as some of the stuff is, I've actually seen research that shows making the little goal boards, where you write up and say, by June of 2026, I'll be able to bench press 400 pounds or whatever and you put little, then you have a visible representation of that goal, which is your eventual goal, which helps you make the 1,000 tiny steps that get you to that goal. Yes, setting goals engages and enforces discipline inside your little head in there, and those kinds of things that build mental resilience, so that because not every day is a good day, and some days you make progress and some days you back up, but those days that you back up, just bearing in mind the bigger goals will keep you help you continue the mission.
Yes. So absolutely making goals and accomplishing goals. That's been a theme of this program. It's something we strongly believe. Victory is really important, and victory comes, certainly in big sweeping victories that we all like to think about, but much more often it comes in small victories daily. And that's extremely important. Building upon success is a surefire way to accomplish and to get further ahead than you are at present. Real accomplishment yields mental health. Absolutely. Must a heathen man always achieve? Must he always strive, struggle, accomplish, create? Are we ever allowed to rest on our laurels, as it were? Alan.
Yeah, there's absolutely a time for rest. I mean, we are engaged in the relentless pursuit of excellence, the unending pursuit of victory. But even then, there's a time to sprint and there's a time to take a breath. Maybe one analogy, and actually the first analogy that came to mind is, as a mead brewer, there are busy, active days when I'm brewing and racking and bottling mead, and then there's days when all I'm doing is drinking some mead. So yes, you are absolutely allowed to take a break and revel in the glory that is your creation.
So, as an Asatru, you're allowed to not achieve stuff, but you should always be achieving stuff. Sure, taking a moment to sit back and relax and have a drink is fine. Nobody's talking about that. And I don't even really think that's fundamentally part of the question. Yes, you should always be engaged in the pursuit of victory. I don't think that, small moments of like, I'm going to relax and watch a TV show is really a fundamental question to that. I don't think you should take periods of being off of that. Your life should synergize around accomplishment. And it looks real different. Sitting back and raising your kids is part of victory. Sitting back and, being a good husband and building and securing a good marriage is part of that. Recreating by reading something to where you learn something and you know more tomorrow than you did today is part of that. Getting out and getting some exercise is part of achieving victory. But, the term resting on your laurels has a meaning. And no, you shouldn't. On this in front of you, if you're looking at the screen, it's got laurels and it's got victory never sleeps with the whole antithesis to the premise of the question. Yes, you always should be trying to pursue victory. Any time that you're not is time that you could be. Be realistic, don't be silly. But yeah, always come back to the touchstone of trying to do, to accomplish, and to become. And you're allowed to not live up to that. But the ideal is to strive as close to that as you can. And the heroes are the ones that spend their time doing and making stuff happen. And there's a lot of other people that don't make it to that height. But the more we all spend our time consciously in the pursuit of victory, the better we all are. Seems a lot of solutions tonight have focused around getting out and getting help, working out, eating right. What impact have you seen actual productive interaction in our faith to have on the mental health of our folk? I would think that could really be the biggest influence. I was reading on the term collective effervescence, as in the heightened emotional state and sense of unity experienced by individuals doing shared group activities. This really seems to sum it up for all that I can feel when traveling and gathering with the folk. Alan, would you like to respond to that?
I agree exactly with what he's saying. And that, yes, I have not heard that term before, but I'm certainly going to adopt its use, collective effervescence. Yes, the joy that we feel doing stuff together is, there's no substitute for it. And I'm glad that he has felt it. I know that I have. And I honestly believe that it has helped lots of those who come to AFA stuff and who keep coming to AFA stuff. I think they feel that and they get that positive feedback, and it helps them become better, stronger, faster, better people. Yes.
Collective effervescence is why I'm here today. I've told this story on here a number of times, but I procrastinated, put it off, didn't come to an AFA event for a long time. I was living up in Alaska. It was, really long way away and all this other stuff. But I finally did in 2010. And it literally changed my life. 3 days with the folk, collectively united in troth to our gods, doing things together, spending time together in a community where I could be holistically who I was. I have and continue to work every day of my life to try to structure increasing amounts of my life to revolve around that, instead of that being something that I just get once a year or whatever. I want more and more and more, because that's the authentic way that we ought to be living. That's where you feel whole and healthy and good, and the world seems right. And so we're working hard to live that and to facilitate all of our folk coming home and living that. I absolutely think that's a key to success in life and mental well-being for individuals and for families and for all of us collectively. And I really like the term collective effervescence. I've never heard that before, but I think it's kind of a neat term, and I'm going to start using it more. Did Founder McNallen create one of the noble virtues, one of the 9 noble virtues? No, I don't believe that he did, Scott. I believe those all 9 of the noble virtues were created and codified by Hoskold and Stubbe of the Ogdenic Rite. I think they're conclusions that many people came to in a number of different ways, but I think they were codified as the 9 noble virtues outside any influence of Steve McNallen. Could a lack of motivation be why some people are in the situation they're in? Because people couldn't just live in their mother's basement, they had to be more motivated. Does challenge motivate people? Alan?
I think it does. The men respond well, and I guess properly raised masculine men respond well to the type of challenge that men will issue to each other, as in, not the long-winded, hand-wringing, would you please try to not be such a lazy fat ass, but rather get up off your lazy fat ass and go do some stuff. That's how men talk to each other. And, if you think that's toxic, you're probably not watching this video really, yes, men should challenge each other to be better, be stronger, be more disciplined. Because yes, we rise to the challenge. And if you shrink from the challenge, we'll find somewhere else to be.
Absolutely. And challenge and the judgment of your peers, your gods, and your ancestors should motivate us all to do things. Competition is a beautiful and amazing thing. It is not a toxic thing. You can find some kind of metastasized negative version of most good things if you're trying to pervert them. But competition in its basic sense is a powerful motivator to achieve and to do things. And amongst men, it should inspire us all to be our best. It doesn't have to be an angry or a grumpy thing at the person issuing the challenge. We're all made better by trying to compete with the men around us to be the best we can be. And ideally, we inspire each other. That's happened in the AFA in a number of times. Shoot, that happened this morning. This morning with Alan. Alan, we were dealing with some minor banking thing, and I didn't return a call that I should have checked my messages on. And I'm like, well, they shouldn't have called me at 6 a.m. And I realized afterwards, I'm like, that was really lame. Hey, Alan, I'm sorry about that. I'll get that better next time. Because, again, when you're in the presence of other men, you want to be your best. That happens a lot, that I see all the time with little stuff. We come to events and we see each other and we talk about things we've done or things we've achieved, and it inspires each of us to want to achieve more and to do more. When you catch yourself slipping to where you're not living up to what other people are doing, taking up the challenge to, pick up your pace. We should all do that from one another. That is a gift that you give your brothers, is giving them something to aspire to and setting down a gauntlet for them to pick up. Setting a mark for them to try to surpass is something we owe each other. And participating in that should bring us all up to a higher level. And your mind should be such that you want to actively engage in that. Even if you don't always win, the striving to win, the motivation through competition and through challenge should be something that ennobles you, not something that cripples you or offends you. Do you think the masculine archetype is suppressed in modern culture and leads to the sickness of the masculine? Alan?
Absolutely. Which again is why so much of the answer, and we keep saying it because we're promoting the brand, but it is absolutely the fact that masculinity is wrongly decried in the current iteration of our so-called civilization. But and with cohort groups, I mean, it's certainly not just the AFA, but there are many groups out there that are working to restore a proper model of masculinity. There is a type of masculinity that goes too far and that can be and that can be toxic, but that line has been drawn so far to the left now that it's ridiculous. And I do think that's a big part of what is wrong with civilization, especially the male part of the civilization, is that proper models of manliness, of decorum, of gentlemanliness are all lumped in that category of toxic masculinity. And that's just wrong. It's wrong-headed to say every expression of manliness is toxic. And the people who believe that, unfortunately, are running the advertising agencies. They're running the entertainment industry. They're certainly running social media. They're running artificial intelligence models, which is why all those things are dangerous and subverting our right worldview. So yes, all that, and the cure, and it's absolutely a big cause of so that men who rightly want to express their masculinity are then suppressed and oppressed by the civilizational forces that want to deprive us of our right place in the world. So yes, we are helping each other stand up and stand to the fore and make men of each other.
Yes. All those things that Alan just said, absolutely. The normal, healthy impulses of masculinity are villainized, they're criticized, and often they are made illegal. They are certainly frowned upon in lots of situations, and they force those impulses often to come out in unhealthy ways. And that's really unfortunate. There's plenty of very healthy and productive expressions of masculinity that it's our challenge to find inventive ways in modern times to channel those towards productive ends and not towards destructive ones. I think that if we were better at that, we would have a much greater mental health situation in the West, certainly amongst our men, but also amongst our women. The proper functioning masculinity is a tremendous strength for our women and children to live under and grow up protected through. And when that's not present, it leads to a lot of the dysfunction, not just of men, but also of women and children. Is the Asatru Folk Association active in Australia? The Asatru Folk Assembly is, in fact, active in Australia. We just recently have our first Australian folk builder that we've had in a very long time, Chris McDonald. If you're interested, C. McDonald, McDonald, C. McDonald at runestone.org. Chris is getting stuff together. They have been going on monthly hikes for, I want to say, about 4 or 5 months now. Very consistently, they're doing stuff. They are based out of the Brisbane area. But yes, we have members and activity in Australia. What do you do if your kid comes out as gay or lesbian? How do you handle that situation? Alan.
Luckily, I don't have that to worry about with my boys. So, that's a tough one. I don't have an answer.
It's honest.
I would be glad to talk to somebody if somebody's actually going through something like that. I would be glad to try to help parse our way through, what a reasonable traditionalist response would be. But, I don't have anything packaged or glib about that.
So I think that the question, and I suppose there's a number of things. So we have people that come home to Asatru at different stages of their life. If you have a teenage child and your wife is not Asatru, your child has not been raised Asatru, and you're just coming home to Asatru, I think you're more likely to find yourself in that situation than with a family that has been raised within the AFA, within, the understanding of Asatru since birth. Some of it comes in with the conception of, what homosexuality is. In the Asatru Folk Assembly, we don't believe that homosexuality is an inherent, legitimate orientation. It is a very dangerous and destructive mental illness. I think there are a lot of things that lead up to someone deciding to pursue a life of homosexuality. Hopefully you would be able to see those things coming, oriented through an Asatru context, and be able to stave those things off. But if you're in a mixed faith home with mixed values, or you are coming at this later in life, you have to play, the ball where it lies. And so that's an interesting question. My answer, and I know it's an evasion of the question, is don't let that become the situation. Don't raise your child in such a way that your child doesn't come out as claiming to be gay or lesbian. And I'll further throw this out. If you don't want your child to have that problem, a really good first step is to be very cautious of their interaction with adult gays and lesbians. Specifically, adult gay men are very disproportionately dangerous to children in that regard. And it's not just me trying to take a shot at them. I think it's really important point of guidance that whatever the world tries to tell you, it's one of the things in this world that is propagated through vampirism, to where the homosexual man abuses children that then go on to become homosexual men and all too often to also abuse children. Stopping that cycle and not letting that take root is a really, really important factor in preventing that from occurring. Couple of different things. I think that if you find yourself in that spot and you're not able to implement the first part of my plan, you're limited in some of your options depending on choices that they make and things that they do. Men and women aren't the same. Gay men and lesbian women, while both suffering mental illness, it's not kind of the same thing. And women can make a lot more mistakes in that regard and still come back to a whole situation, whereas men cannot. And that's just an unfortunate truth that is. Hopefully, by the time they come out on that, they have not made choices with their life that they can't unmake. And yes, it includes, certainly for men engaging in homosexual sex acts voluntarily, but also in the world we live in today, there's that constant drumbeat of the transgender thing and surgical and chemical situations that can forever damage people. So the earlier that you catch it, the better. Trying to compassionately get them back in a state of good mental health to where they heal from whatever impulse makes them feel that that's their orientation, I think is important. I also think it's really important that you don't, out of an overabundance of feeling familial kindness, don't give them the impression that it's okay. That doesn't have to be done in a hateful or an uncaring way, but they need to see a firm resolve of like, no, this isn't okay. This is really bad and really unhealthy, and I don't want this for you. I want to help you. How can I help you? You can be compassionate, but all too often there's this rush to acceptance to where, out of a fear of hurting feelings, we legitimize destructive and dangerous paths for children in today's world. And I would advise you against doing that. If the best you can say was that you tried to stop it and you stood firm in advising against it and you did your best, that's a lot better than you bending and going along with it still to have the same outcomes. At least you can be a touchstone of sanity and appropriate traditional things that perhaps they can look back to and learn from, and that other people can see and take strength from. But that's a really unfortunate situation that I, hope to never have to face. And I hope we can raise our kids healthy enough that they don't find themselves in that situation. I wish I had a better answer for it, and I don't. Does the AFA have an opinion on having an AI friend? Yes, that's ridiculous on the face of it. You can't have friendship with something that isn't a being. That's preposterous. Alan, do you have a dissenting opinion on that?
I would amplify your aggressive stance there on both as a matter of principle and because it substitutes for having a real friend. Like, I'm talking to my computer means you could be talking to Matt. I mean, he'll call you back. Unless you call him at 6 o'clock in the morning and identify it as a robocall.
There's a window, and you can't get flagged as spam risk either. I've trained myself not to respond to the spam risk. I would add this on it too. Words have meanings. Like, even if you get to a point where you have a personal computer that does your bidding, that's like a sci-fi robot that does stuff, you can pretend friendship on it and give it a cute name and like dress it up funny. That's not the same as having an actual friendship. So this is a thing too that I caution against is people that pet parents. People do cutesy things with their pets, and that's fine. But I don't think we should ever give the message to people without children that it's somehow just the same that you are caring for an animal as if that you are a parent. Words have meanings, and when we casually use those things wrongly, we unintentionally devalue the real meaning of them. So yeah, I think the idea of an AI friend is absurd on the face of it. Is complete abstinence from alcohol and tobacco within? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't read that right. My fault. My eyes are getting tired. Is complete abstinence from alcohol a taboo within the AFA? There seems to be an emphasis on drinking woven into the lore in important holidays. Alan.
The short version of the history of Asatru in America is that in the olden days, meaning up until about 2015 or so, there was a lot of drinking. Excess is always a subjective term, but there was a lot of drinking. There is a lot less now. I mean, markedly less. In fact, I won't say there's none, but it's very, very little and always under control. Almost always under control, because we are holding ourselves up as good examples. Same time, every once in a while somebody gets a little over the edge, and that happens. It's happened to the best of us. It's happened to me. There is not a lot of drinking, certainly not in the regular monthly events at the Hoff. I think there is some emphasis on drinking. There's discussion of drinking in the lore, but certainly in the lore, but the Havamal advises in at least two passages not to drink very much. Ale is no friend of men. The heron of forgetfulness hovers over Fowler's Hall. So, that we are cautioned against excess. The other thing that I think that we need to bear in mind about the lore, especially the sagas, is that it comes to us from a time when the Viking folk were struggling to survive at the margin of a oppositional culture. And I think there's a big difference in how much alcohol is justifiable. If your profession is taking a sword and shield and going and trying to kill somebody who is using a sword and spear against you to try to take their stuff, then if you can live through that after a couple of days of siege warfare, then you're entitled to, have a couple of beers and a couple of more. But, if your idea of struggle is, getting home at the end of the day and, barely being able to work your 8-hour shift at the insurance company or whatever, that's a very different uptake on it. So yes, it is okay to have a couple of beers now and then, but excess is not a good thing.
So I'm going to approach it from a little bit different angle. I think we underplay the importance of drinking a little bit because I think it's become a social thing that's been misused a lot. In the early days of Asatru, like Alan mentioned, or the early days of the modern resurgence of Asatru, there was a lot of people just using it as something they weren't taking super seriously, and they would just go get wasted at stuff, and that's sloppy and degenerate and not good. But there's a time and a place, just as much in Viking warrior culture as, sure, you're justified in throwing back a few after you've been in mortal combat. You also have much more reason to keep your head on a swivel and to stay clear-headed when you're surrounded by people you don't know. And I think that's where some of it comes into. Drinking for our ancestors always had to do with the social context. And to have them all, the passages about not drinking, or you don't want to look foolish in front of people that you don't know or you're trying to make a first impression on. You don't want to embarrass yourself by your level of intoxication and let that take control of your wits, certainly. But in a different time and a different expression of our lore, the Romans first used the term in vino veritas as a commentary on the Germanic tribesmen, because the tribesmen would get together and they'd get faced when they're having a decision about something important, and they would drink heavily talking about it. Now, they would hold off making final decision until they reapproached it sobered up. But there's something to be said about being in a very high trust environment. And the same thing that many of us use alcohol for in our life as a social lubricant. There's something about sharing a beer with somebody, loosening up a little bit, letting down some of your ingrained inhibitions and standoffishness to have a very real heart-to-heart about something that's important to you. I think we just live in a time where we've seen a lot of really casual, really negative expressions of that. And I think you don't see like the same family dynamic when you have that. It's not like people are going around and getting rip-roaring drunk, in their house at their wife and kids or whatever on that. And then some of the more negative horror stories that, many people have experienced. What you see is a warrior culture where the guys get together and, drink a little bit with one another and open up and are able to share deep things with other men without the same kind of rigid standoffishness that happens amongst proud men from time to time. So there's a place to allow yourself to have a buzz and to loosen up socially with consuming alcohol, but there's also an inherent responsibility to marshal that with maintaining and control of who you are, how you're thinking, and control of your actions. And one of the big overarching themes in Asatru, and one of the reasons that I refuse to not use the term Aryan, is it means noble. It's your obligation as a noble man or a noble woman to make decisions about yourself and about your abilities and to be responsible for those decisions. I don't want to tell you to drink or not to drink at something. I'll offer you a beer, and if you know that that's not something you can do, it's on you to refuse that. Or if it's something that you choose to engage in, for you to take on the responsibility of having, 1 or 5 or however many that you need to, and then controlling yourself. We want our adult men and women to make responsible choices. And that's where we're trying to head. It's not that, alcohol is good or alcohol is bad. It's your ability to control them or not. It may very well be good for Alan and bad for you. It may very well be, good in a certain measure for one person and bad in a certain measure for another person. And we respect in the AFA your agency to make that choice and to recognize your strengths and abilities on it. And I'll say this just for kind of context on it. At every AFA event we go to, there's invariably, a handful of people that for whatever reason don't drink and don't feel comfortable participating in, the shared drinking with everyone else. And that's fine. The emphasis on alcohol culture in Asatru is much less than it was. It's still something, it depends on the context and what the culture is of the folks you're around. Usually when I'm out at Odenshoff, I have a few beers when I'm out there because we're spending the day sitting around talking to friends and family and people we care about. We drink mead during our ritual very often, but we also have people that abstain from that and that don't consume alcohol for whatever reason. And we're very respectful of that. So no, there's not a taboo against you making a responsible choice as an adult. There's a taboo against you having a bad experience with alcohol and then demanding that none of the rest of us are allowed to have alcohol because you made a poor choice with it. But no, we encourage and respect people who've chosen that's not something that they can handle, or for whatever reason they've sworn it off. That's absolutely something that we give respect to. Got 2 more questions left tonight. Does the AFA have an opinion on using predictive reasoning? I'm using the air quotes, predictive reasoning. Alan, do you have a opinion on predictive reasoning?
I think that's the proper use of technology. It is pattern recognition behavior, and computers can crunch those numbers in a more objective way, although the objective number crunching that they do always seems to match up with the subjective number crunching that we have done, at least in the the context that I've seen, where they talk about doing predictive policing. But no, that is the proper role for technology.
I don't know that I've ever heard the term predictive reasoning before. And I've tried to Google it. Apparently, it's a term that has a meaning. The examples that it uses are real common sense things. I didn't know there was a special nomenclature for it. So I have no opinion on predictive reasoning because I've never encountered the term before. I trust that Alan is steering you straight on that, and I will acquiesce.
Lawspeaker's thoughts on it are what that's the definition I thought. So,
all right. And last question: what if your child grows up and wants to marry a man or woman of another race? Alan, what say you?
Again, I am quite certain that I will not have that issue to deal with personally. I can say that if it were to happen, there would be I don't know what the term is for divorcing your child, but that's what the story is there. That is verboten.
Yeah. Again, I can imagine we live in such a transitional time to where some people are coming into this with grown children already. Some people are coming into this with, maybe even adult children that have already made that choice. The question you ask is kind of a personal one, and I think it implies advice to others. But the first answer, and this is kind of like the gay question, if I've done my job right, that's not going to happen. That's no guarantee that I will have done my job right. But I think that's all of our hope and all of our mission, that if we raise our child correctly, they won't be in a circumstance where that's a decision they decide to make. But if that is the decision they decide to make, we have an obligation to stand on things that we actually believe in and not compromise them when they happen to hit close to home. And I think that's a problem a lot of people have because they believe they're serious about something, they pledge their seriousness to something, but then all of a sudden it's a whole different story when it's close to home and their fundamental values change, and all of a sudden, up is down and left is right, and they shift who they are. Don't do that. That's wrong. And when your children realize the error of their ways, there is one scenario where they'll be able to look back on you with respect for standing strong for what you believe in, and another where they won't. And respect isn't always them agreeing or acquiescing, but it has a value. No, if my child decided that they wanted to do that, I would do my very best to dissuade them from that very misguided notion. I certainly would not attend that wedding or participate in that union in any way. And I would do everything I could to prevent that from occurring, because that is an extreme travesty for our folk, for a family's all of their lineage going back to the dawn of our people. And that's a terrible transgression against our folk and our gods. And I really, like I said, I'm mortified at the thought that might occur, and I would do everything I could to try to dissuade them from making such a very poor choice. All right. So I appreciate everybody with your questions this evening.
Got one more to do if you want it.
I said we had 2 more left tonight, and I didn't know about how long we're going to run that out for the Lawspeaker. Alan, do you want to take one more?
Only because this last question is something that I feel like I'm qualified to speak to.
All right, this is the final one. No take backsies. What would you do if you're nervous to give, to give a best man speech at your brother's wedding in 3 months? Go for it, Alan.
Okay. I know that not everyone is comfortable public speaking, and I know that that's one of the greatest fears that a lot of people have. That being said, it's your brother's wedding. Him, his bride, your family, her family are going to be very forgiving of any stumbling that you do. Because they're nervous too. It's a time of high stress, high chaos. So they're going to be okay with a little bit of fumbling around. So, I would say don't be nervous, but you're going to be nervous, okay? But it's going to be okay. Number one. Number two, the other big thing, and this is the big thing, is practice, okay? Think of your speech ahead of time, write it all down, word for word, however long you want it to be, and every day driving to work, every day driving home, over in the shower, while you're shaving, over and over and over again, rehearse that speech. Because then when you stand up, all you have to do is go, I'm a little bit nervous, but I hope you guys are going to be okay with the things that I have to say about my brother and what a jerk he is. And, although he's kind of a good guy, and then you just let it flow. You come, write your speech from the heart, memorize it, stand up and let it rip. You can do it.
Yeah, I think being nervous at public speaking is a very, very common thing that a lot of people struggle with. It has never been something that's in my comfort zone. But you got to rise to the occasion. You certainly got to take the tremendous honor and opportunity to give the speech. Again, what Allen said, the family is primed to be very forgiving of imperfection. What I would say, everything Allen said with the follow-up, if you practice and you know where you're going, don't get obsessed with getting it word for word perfect. You know where you're going, you know what you're trying to say. Don't allow a slip or a forget at one point to completely befuddle you. That's the biggest trap that I've seen people fall in when they have something pre-scripted, is if something happens that they get thrown off track, and they completely melt down because they don't just roll with it and like, anyways, what I was saying was go back into what they're saying and do their thing. Though nobody's looking or out to get you. People make mistakes. If you forget something, you may be the only one who knows you forgot it. So keep rolling. If, there's an audible pause and you've got to chuckle at yourself or have a drink of your champagne or whatever, and then continue, don't allow, a slight slip or a forgetfulness break your stride. If you wrote it from the heart and you've practiced it and you know what you're going to say, trust yourself to be able to get back on track or fill in the gaps with, something from the heart if you need to in the moment. But congratulations to your brother and congratulations to you for getting the honor to speak at his wedding. That's awesome. Thank you everybody for being here this evening. It's been a good and I think a really important conversation tonight. I hope it was useful to folks. Something that I wanted to say that I didn't earlier, just to put out there. I know that, different people tune into the show at different times. We may have a lot of first-time listeners tonight. There may be people with more or less familiarity with what we do. But our Gothar, of which Alan and I are both Gothar, we spend a lot of time counseling and helping our folk work through things. I think it seems, obvious that we talk about lore stuff or we do rituals, but the lion's share of time spent doing Gothi work is done counseling and trying to help people work through situations in their life and navigate mental health, emotional well-being, and just, advice on being successful and productive and happy and fulfilled in your life and your family. If you need help or you need somebody to talk to, please reach out at any time to one of our Gothar. Gothar@runestone.org. I'm sorry. So this is kind of what I meant about the public speaking. Anyways, what I meant to say was GOTHAR@runestone.org. But at any point in time, reach out and somebody would be happy to help you with whatever you're dealing with. If you are having a severe mental health thing, please get help for it. The important thing is fixing a problem that you have. Don't let a fear of, perceived weakness prevent you from getting help that you need. Reach out and get help that you need. And if you need to reach out to any of our Gothar, please feel free to do that at any time you need to. And we will do our best to be helpful to you and get you on the right track. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Alan, thank you so much for talking to us about this really important subject this evening. We appreciate having you on, as always. Any idea what we're doing next month?
No.
Okay, there you have it. So it's a mystery, but another important, timely adulting topic will be brought to you on the 4th Wednesday of July. I am looking forward to talking to you all then with our Lawspeaker. Until then, next week, join me and Witten Swan as we continue working our way through the Edda. Make it out to Midsummer if you can. I hope to see you guys this weekend if you can come to Midsummer at Odenshoff. Now is the time. Make a bold choice. Get out there to Brownsville, and I look forward to seeing you.
Go experience the collective effervescence.
Collective effervescence. That's what it's all about. All right, guys. Thank you. I've enjoyed sharing the evening with you. Until next time, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.